Sometimes head pins come to you a little bit bent. You can straighten these just with your fingers. They're good to go. Pick up your bead and put it on the head pin. Let it slide down to the end of the head pin. Take your chain nose plier and with the very tip of it, grab the wire right above the bead and then press the wire away from you, making a 90-degree bend. I've already marked my plier about 1/4 inch from the end with a little Sharpie line. That way I make my loops the same every time. That's where I'm going to put my plier, right here inside that bend. And I'm going to press the wire up, over, and towards me against the plier. That's as far as I can go. Now I need to just rotate the plier so it's out of the way. And now I'm going to continue pushing down and around. And you do have to sort of swing past the bead. There's my loop. At this point, some people get their round nose plier in here and they try to bend this back to center the loop. I generally don't bother because I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. But if you want to do that, you stick the tip of your plier in there and just gonna go. And it somewhat more centers your loop. I have my bent chain nose. I have the nose pointing away from my work area. I'm gonna grab that loop. And now I need to take this tail and wrap it around the stem until it meets the bead. So I'm using my chain nose pliers. I'm grabbing at the very end. You don't want to grab up here because where you grab it, you're going to kink up the wire. And this is a short head pin. So just grab the very end and just 1/4 turn, and then you have to reposition. And make sure you can see your work. So just turn that bead as needed, pull it around, reposition, pull it around, doing about 1/4 turn each time. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less. That's it. I'm out of room. Take my flush cutters. The back of it is what makes the flush cut, so I put the back of it against what I'm keeping. So I get right in there, and before I make the cut, I put my finger over this little tail of wire. That will keep it from shooting in some unpredictable direction and hitting me in the face. So put my finger there, snip, and then it'll just fall. If your tail is sticking up at all, just press it down. There you go. Let's do another one. Head pin, put the bead on, chain nose plier, right above the bead, make a 90-degree bend. Round nose plier, put that in the corner of your bend and come up and over, reposition, continue the loop. There's my loop. I'm right-handed, so when I get to this step, I hold the loop in my left hand so that my more dominant hand can do the wrapping. So I am using the bent nose to hold most of that loop, but the part where the wires cross, that is exposed. Use the chain nose plier to grab the very end of the wire and 1/4 turns. You can also start this step with your fingers. Sometimes that's a little bit easier to get it really tight. So just like push it a little bit. There we go. I'm at the end of my wire. There is like a little bit more wiggle room this time. It just means when I made my 90-degree bend, I wasn't quite at the end of my plier. And that's okay. I'm going to not worry about that and just trim it. I put my finger over it so I don't poke my eye out. press the tail down. My project calls for 3, so let's make one more. Head pin, put the bead on, chain nose plier, right there at the end, press it 90 degrees, take your round nose plier, get right in the bend, come up and over, rotate the plier, push down and away, finishing the loop. This is very forgiving. I slid a little bit past the Sharpie mark there, so my loop is slightly smaller. Totally fine, don't worry about it. It's just a guideline. Hold the loop, press around, and look, I'll show you something else. You can really go, they're very soft. You can go around with your finger if you want to. If you had to do a lot of these, I would say it starts to feel kind of pokey on your finger. But to do just a couple, you'll be okay. So that's as far as it'll go. Snip it, press the tail. There are my 3 wrapped bicones. To make my bail, I have 7 inches of 20 gauge wire and about 3 inches from one end. I'm going to make a 90-degree bend. So I grab it with my chain nose plier and press firmly away. Get my 90-degree bend. I'm using my bail making plier. We're going to be making the bail around the larger side. So that's what I put here at my loop. And I'm not really like above it. I'm like right here in the corner. And I'm going to press up and over towards me, reposition the plier, and continue my loop. So it looks like this. I'm going to hold this with my bent nose plier with the nose pointing away from me. And you can definitely do this whole thing with your fingers. Just press it around. 1, 2, 3 loops. Trim the excess, hold on to this tail. It's a little bit longer than when we were working with the head pins. Just hold on to it and snip. Press that tail close. If you have a hammer, hammer your bail. I use a nylon bench block and a nylon hammer so that I don't scratch the wire. I'm also not trying to flatten the wire. And then I also hammer the first like 1.5 inches. You don't want to hammer the whole length of this because part of this we're going to be wire wrapping at the other end. So just the part near the bail. That's kind of fun. 6mm crystal. My jewelry tube. Round bead. See how that goes right over the jewelry tube? The jewelry tube just makes this section of the wire thicker and helps stabilize the bead on there. My focal bead. Round bead. Bicone. There we go. Very pretty. Now we're going to make a loop at the end here, but the thing to remember is before we close this loop, before we do the wraps, we have to pick up our dangle. So I would like to have the same 3 wraps at the bottom that they have at the top. So I'm just going to measure on my plier. Just gonna like grab this and see, okay, how far back in the jaw do I need to be to have that same amount of room? All right, I see that. I'm gonna come here with that same spacing. Hold this upside down so that gravity can push your beads down and make sure that you're right against your beads. Push it away from you to make a 90-degree bend. Round nose plier. This time, really, really try to make it on your mark. If you make the loop too small here, it is kind of fiddly to get the wrapped bicones on. So I put my plier there at the bend, up, over, towards me, reposition the plier, push down and away. There, I've completed my loop. Now I just need to open this up a little bit. It's just like opening a jump ring. So I'm gonna hold it here. Well, it's not just like opening a jump ring. Normally I would use 2 pliers, but just hold the one side and pull the tail away a little bit. And then pop on your bicones. Pinch it back closed. And now we're going to pinch the loop. Our bicones are sort of like hanging out over here, and we're gonna wrap in this space here. And again, you could do this with just your fingers, or you could use your chain nose plier. I'm gonna get it started at least with my finger, and then I think I might grab this and pull it around. All right, perfect. Trim the extra, hold on to this so it doesn't fly away, press down the tail. Beautiful.